Kia ora koutou Year 13s, it's Ms Mac here. So I'm a little bit excited. I've never taught public goods before. It's something that I've wanted to do for a while. Well, to be precise, I've wanted to look at walking tracks in New Zealand. I did want to do the Tongariro crossing. That's a little bit pricey for us all to go up to. So we're going to look at something closer to home, which is called the Stairway to Heaven. So you might know this as the escarpment track. It's between Pukeroa Bay and Paikakariki. Awesome trip. It's 3 hours thereabouts walking. Bring your own water and make sure you go to the toilet before you go. There's nowhere to go on the way, and there's no water on the way. So what I want to do is, this is an example of a public good. Hopefully you will, at the end of this lesson, understand why. And this is like the first thing we want to do. So if we think about our internal assessment that's coming up, the first thing you need to do is explain or explain in detail how, in this case, public goods and this walking track could be market failure. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through, and it's a little bit different to externalities. So it's a little bit broken down a bit. I've tried to think about how you need to approach this and what you need to know. So the first thing we're going to look at is what is a public good. So by looking at what does it mean to be a public good as opposed to just a normal good, how does this walking track and other walking tracks and other examples of public goods meet that definition? Then we're going to look at what does that mean when you think about the characteristics of a public good in particular. What does that mean in terms of how it's provided, or if it's provided at all? After we've done that, we'll look at what the socially optimum level of public good provision is. So if you're going to provide walking tracks and national parks and stuff like that, like how many should you provide? You're all good and amazing, but does that mean that we provide everything under the sun, or do we kind of like have some sort of rules in place? Big thing for us is with the idea of allocative efficiency, and we're looking at market failure, why with a public good you wouldn't put in user pays, or why it's actually more efficient in the first instance to not charge to use the service, and if you do charge to use it, so put in user pays, you use it, you pay for it, it actually reduces efficiency in the market, or the market for that public good. We then look at what can happen when too many people begin to use the public good, and how in that exceptional case when too many people are using it, it actually can become inefficient and it requires further government intervention, which is step 2, government policies to intervene in the provision of public goods. So let's go to our first little section, which is what does it mean to be a public good. So I'm going to try and maybe break this up into segments and then use this to kind of map you through understanding all these different bullet points. So the first thing we'll look at is what it means to be a public good versus a private good. So we've got some quite cool examples here. I did totally take this off the internet, only just because it was quicker, to be honest. So you've got here a range of what are called different goods. A private good, which is just your average normal, I don't know, like a glass of wine at a bar, or a t-shirt that you buy at Hallenstein's or something like that. This is what we call a private good because it's excludable. If you can't pay for it, you can't have it. And if you think about wine, you can't have it if you're not over the legal age for drinking, which is currently 18. It's also rival in that, for example, with the wine, say it's filled up to like halfway, as soon as one person begins drinking it, there's less available for anyone else. So that good tends to be rival in its use. I guess if you think about the t-shirt, if one person wears the t-shirt, then it's going to become like rival, and that, you know, I don't know, it might smell, or like, you know, someone might like it becomes worn, I guess, it might wear, and therefore probably at a certain point at the very least it would become rival, like someone else wouldn't get the same, I guess, pleasure from wearing that t-shirt as the first person. So that's what it means by rival and excludable. Now we will look at something called the tragedy of the commons later. So this is where you've got something that is non-excludable, and they use the example of fisheries, and that's often like where they talk about tragedy of the commons, or they talk about like medieval, like late medieval England, where they all like owned, you had like the common land that everyone in the village could farm off. The problem is that you couldn't exclude anyone and say the village from using it, but because like all of them and too many people were using it, it became rival. So it meant that with too many people using it, the land started to give out, the soil become depleted of like nutrients and stuff, and so therefore it was no longer as good, and therefore it becomes rival in the use. So there's your private good and there's your common good. You've got this example here of a club good, and I think cable T is the example, cable TV. So basically it is excludable, because what you can do, I believe, I'm not too clued up on this, you can, what's it called, mess with the signal. You can do something to the signal where you have to have like a code to be able to get into the signal type thing, where you've got to like have a skybox or I don't know, like a membership. So unless you have that, you can't use it, so therefore it's excludable. But actually, like, once you provide, I guess, Sky TV, like, it's put out there, one person using cable TV isn't going to reduce the use of someone else watching it. And then you've got like the cinema, although I'd say to a point, you know, one person sitting in the cinema isn't going to ruin the view of, say, someone else in the cinema who's sitting in a different seat. So that's what's called a club good. We don't look at that, so you don't really need to worry about it, but it's just for interest's sake. And then we have here what are called public goods, which is what I'm wanting us to look at today. So it was lovely they got air and sunshine. Well, that's quite nice, isn't it? So it's non-excludable. We can't stop anyone from breathing in air. We can't also, you know, if one person breathes in some air, that's not going to stop other people from breathing in air. So definitely meets the good there. Sunshine, same thing. News, that's an interesting one. Providing news, you know, you can't, I guess, stop someone from hearing the news or one way or the other. And it's not like rival if one person, I don't know, looks at stuff and then, you know, someone else can still look at stuff and get the same information. We'll look at some examples in a moment, but yeah, so it's just kind of going for that idea of, can you exclude someone from using it? And when someone uses the good, does it rival, does it leave like less for someone else to enjoy? All right, so let's think about that, and then think about like some goods that would meet the definition of a public good. All right, if we're thinking the private good, your general, any everyday market goods, supply and demand. I look at pies a lot, often because I want them. You know, I don't know, a car, a house, these are all private goods. You don't have the money, you can't buy it, then you're excluded. You know, if I eat a pie, there's less pie, well, there's no pie for anyone else to eat, so it's definitely rival. So we're going to look at some public goods, and I want you to take a moment and I want you to think about some examples of public goods. All right, so something that is excludable, non-excludable, sorry, and non-rival. There's another word called non-depletable. I feel it sort of means the same thing as non-rival. So you're thinking about this, have a think, because I'm not going to show you just yet. What would be some examples of goods that could be non-rival? I just realized this is not even on present, and you can probably see my examples, or you can see it there. So let's just go to here. All right, so let's have a wee think. What could be some examples of a public good? All right, they've got these ones here. All right, I want us to think of some other ones. We can't stop people from like using it or enjoying it, and one person using it doesn't leave less for someone else to have. All right, have a think. So let's have a look. And no, it's not moving. Here we go. So roads. This is an interesting one. You can have private roads, this is true, and we won't look at tolls and shortly. But the idea is that once you provide a road, you know, if someone drives or bikes on the road, we don't charge someone to do that. You go out of your house and you go onto the road, you're not going to have to pay like a fee to continue on. And if you get on the road, it doesn't mean that there's less road for someone else to use. With that last bit, do think though, and we'll look at this later, you know, if there was too many cars on the road or too many bikes, maybe that last bit about being rival might be kind of affected a bit. If we think of footpaths, it's another example, just like the road. You've got a footpath, all right, going out of school down to the front gate and you go onto the footpath. I'm not going to, you know, no one's going to stand there and go, right, pay up, get out your FOS card. So it's not excludable. And when you get on the footpath, all your mates can come behind you and share the footpath. You know, eventually, if there was like heaps of you, it could be crowding the footpath, but there's still the same amount of footpath for everyone else. So these are quite good ones. Walking tracks, so that's our feature for our internal, and that's the thing I really want to focus on. So we'll talk about this more in class, and I want you to think about this as an example and find evidence to show it's a public good. But Can you stop anyone from going on the walking track? Not really, no. All right, maybe you need to get out more and go on our walking tracks and you'll see why. And generally speaking, when I go for a walk up Mount Kaukau or Colonial Knob, like I enjoy it, and if someone else comes along, they still get to enjoy it too for the same way. Street lights is a classic one. You know, you have a street light, you need it for light at night to see where you're going. If you walk along, we don't go, oi, before you step in the path of the street light, you have to pay. That doesn't, I mean, who can stand there for like hours and hours at end? No, it's just ridiculous. We're not going to do that. So we don't exclude people from enjoying the street lights. And, you know, the street light's there, it's going, just having it one person enjoy the light isn't going to wreck it for anyone else. National parks, similar to the walking tracks, once you provide, like even think about like the parks in the city centre, once they're provided, you know, it costs to provide them. That's true, and that's something we can think about. But once it's provided, people can come and use it. We don't go, oi, Midland Park, before you go and sit down by the water, you have to pay $2 or whatever. I suppose they could, but really, who's going to stand there for ages to do that? And what if, like, I don't know, some kid runs behind them and goes and plays in the water? What are they going to do? Run after them and go pay up $2? I don't think so. So again, you can't exclude someone, and to a fairly large extent, it's non-rival in terms of people can go into the park and everyone gets the same pleasure. With the national parks and the footpaths, you know, and this is where we're heading with this, at some point that rivalness can become affected. You know, too many people there, you could argue people aren't enjoying the same benefit. National defence, similar. Okay, we don't go, World War IV is about to start. Okay, before I defend you, stop you from being shot or something, you've got to pay, I don't know, like 50 grand. You can get like private armies and stuff, like that's totally true. But we're talking about National Defence, New Zealand Defence Force. If, God forbid, someone was actually to declare war on New Zealand, we don't go around rounding up on the entire population and saying, all right, we've imminent invasion. I don't know from who, you know, it's like tomorrow when the war begun type scenario. Before we defend you and stop you from being blown up or like shot or rounded up and put into like a camp or something, you've got to pay, I don't know, 50 grand or something. It doesn't happen like that. And kind of to a large extent, you know, we get the Navy out and the Air Force and stuff like that. What they do in terms of defending us isn't like, right, well, if they defend me, it's not like wrecking necessarily their ability to defend you. Yeah, I can kind of see to an extent if they try and defend too many people, it might become rival. Oh, and lastly, the police. Okay, so they too, we don't go, oh, before I stop this criminal from attacking you, you've got to pay. No, it doesn't work like that. And having the police there to help one person doesn't necessarily deplete the use for someone else. And so with that last sentence, you do need to think that, yes, public goods, to find a pure example of this, it is quite hard because that idea of non-rivalness, particularly in our day and age with like increasing population, you can argue a lot of these things. There is too many people and it is meaning that the use of one person, the benefit you get is perhaps being affected, like not enjoying it as much because there's too many people around or too many people are using it. So what we're going to do now in class is we're going to think about walking tracks, and you can look at the Stairway to Heaven, or you just think about like the Tongariro Crossing or the Abel Tasman and stuff like that. But if you go to Moodle, topic 9, and there's a folder called walking tracks, I might put like walking track resources, and I want you to watch the short film that's here. It's only 2 minutes. And then I want you to go to that link that says Te Aroa Trust site, and I want you to look at what's there and read about the track. And once you've done that, I want you to make notes about how walking tracks, and in particular the Stairway to Heaven, meets the definition or the characteristic of non-rival. How is it non-excludable? When we actually visit it, you should be able to see the whole non-excludable factor, right? So you can see it with your own eyes. Also find out how it was, like who provided it, how was it paid for, so how did they fund it, so how did they do that? All right, so I want you to do that. Okay, thanks.